everyone, it's Hilary Cragg here. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope it's helpful. And today I'm going to talk about how you talk to somebody with a dementia. And also I'm going to talk about what some of the communication issues are. So they're known as dysphasias, and you can have a receptive, expressive or an aphasia, and I'll explain what all of those are. A receptive dysphasia, it means that it's about that ability to receive the information. So when somebody talks to a person with dementia who's got receptive dysphasia, it means they don't receive the information very well and they don't understand it and they don't process it. So something's happening in that receiving the information and working out actually what that means. And what's being said to them. And their brain, the functioning of the brain can break down in a number of ways. It may be that they have they have difficulty hearing, and actually that's probably the easiest one to resolve if it's just to do with their hearing, because you can look to try and improve their hearing, but it's about the processing of what they do hear and trying to make sense of those sounds that come into their ears and work out what's being said, work out what those words are and what those words mean. So that's receptive dysphasia. It's about not being able to receive and understand the information that's coming into them. And then expressive dysphasia is about the ability to express out. So it's about not being able to communicate the words coming out. It's usually around a loss of language, but it potentially could be around problems with facial expression, because people just don't really understand and so don't know how to get their facial expression right, because they're just struggling to understand those words. But expressive dysphasia is about words coming out of them, that those words aren't good, that they're not in whole sentences and that they don't make sense. And so people can sometimes not make a whole sentence. They can get their words confused. So if they were being asked about something to eat, and you're asking about, say, beef or chicken, they might be able to say cow, but not beef. And so it's kind of there's a recognition that there's something to do with that animal, but they can't match the words up, or they've forgotten those specific words. But there is a problem in creating the sentence with all the right words in the right place. And sometimes it's just reducing that down to their ability to say much smaller sentences, or maybe one or two words. And so that moves on to this issue of, well, how do you communicate with a person with dementia? And try and help and support them to understand. Well, firstly, actually, your tone of voice is going to express a lot. And if they're struggling to understand, as frustrating and as irritating as that may be to you, that's not their fault. They have damage in their brain that means that that's what's happening. And so if you're asking a question and you might have asked it for the fifth time and you're now starting to get frustrated because you're asking the question for the fifth time and you haven't got an answer, that's actually not their fault. And so keeping your tone of voice and your body language consistent with the question that you're asking is really useful for somebody with a dementia. So if you're asking them about something to eat, then you ask them in that inflective tone. So the tone goes up when you ask the question, do you want something to eat? And the intonation goes up when you ask a question at the end of the sentence. So giving them those kinds of clues is helpful. Keeping the frustration out, if you've had to say it 5 or 10 times, is also very useful. And if they're really struggling to understand the words, then keep your sentences incredibly small and only ask one question at a time. So if you need to ask 4 questions, do you want tea or coffee for breakfast? Do you want cereal or toast? and do you want to have a shower first, or do you want breakfast first? Actually, don't ask all of those questions in one go. Ask one of them and wait for the answer. And ask it in simple terms. So, do you want tea? And if they don't understand, just tea. And if you've got the right intonation, and sometimes even if you've got the visual clue, tea, that might be helpful to them. So visual clues are useful, keeping it very short, very simple, and one question at a time. It's really useful. And it may be frustrating. And if they've asked you the question, if they've asked you the same thing 5 times, it's actually because they haven't remembered that they've asked you the previous 4 times. To them, they're asking this question anew. It's new and fresh to them each time that person asks you the question. So yes, it might be a perfectly simple answer and a perfectly reasonable answer in other circumstances to go, you've answered that question, you've asked me that question 5 times, I've answered it 5 times. They don't know that. So actually making sure that if they say to you, can I have a cup of tea? You go, yeah, I'll make you a cup of tea. And it might be the 5th or 6th or 10th time that you're asking that question. And it is a perfectly reasonable thing to feel annoyed and frustrated. But actually, you will make the life of the person with dementia much easier if you keep that frustration to yourself and find other strategies to deal with that. So I hope that's useful. I hope that's helpful. Keep your language simple. Make sure that they can hear you. Visual clues are useful. I hope that helps. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.